guys, welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast Coffee Break Session, the show where we cover foundational Treasury topics and questions in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your coffee. This is your host, Alexa, and I'm joined today with Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back, Craig.
It's good to be back, and it's good to talk about security standards, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too. So today we're going to cover card security and PCI-DSS. If you can maybe walk us through what PCI-DSS is, Craig?
It's a security program for cards, and the acronym stands for Payment Card Industry. That's the PCI. And Data Security Standard is the DSS. So PCI-DSS is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. And it's for those organizations that handle card data. And this program is designed to reduce the level of fraud and ultimately the costs associated with fraud on the card industry.
All right, that makes sense. I mean, the name itself is a bit of a mouthful, but I mean, that's pretty understandable definition for it. So when did this program start, and who really cares about this specifically, or who should be caring about PCI-DSS?
Well, it hasn't reached the age of maturity, so it's just under 18 years old. It started December 2004, December 15th, 2004, to be more specific. And this grew out of this environment of increased losses due to fraud. And if we just think back at that time as internet commerce was growing very rapidly, fraud also is growing with it at a faster rate. So those were some of the earlier days of e-commerce, and that was one of the big drivers of putting in this type of program.
Okay. So I know you said at the start of this that this applies to any company that has card payments. So I immediately thought of, those super tiny companies or small businesses that might operate. So would those be in scope for that as well?
Well, they can be if they're storing card data. I think the most companies, when you're smaller, it's really hard to provide all the protections yourself. And so you might use a third-party provider who makes it so that your company never stores the card data. It's encrypted from the point of contact or touchless all the way through the end, and your company never sees the card information, never has it. That tends to be how people try to approach it. But sometimes smaller companies have to accept it, and then they have to have the PCI-DSS compliance activities completed on an annual basis.
Okay. I like the way that you kind of restated my question when you said that. Everyone who's using or accepting cards as well as storing that card data. So I feel like that was really the differentiating word there, which is the storing piece of it. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. So really, what can we learn from the world of payment cards and PCI-DSS?
I think there's a couple things. One is that issues can drive improvements, right? When pain reaches a certain threshold, people strive to fix it. And that certainly was the case here. Fraud drove this standard because it was increasing the cost. Criminals were organized and they were adding excessive cost, which required a stronger network response. And that was what came about. And so since this was a major payment channel and they added security requirements for participants, we could assume that this would continue or expand into other payment channels and organizations that run different payment channels or messaging channels. And we will see that as the case. I know you have some more podcasts lined up for that. But the other part about what we can learn from PCI-DSS is it wasn't just a focus on the network aspects and the system aspects, the digital firewalls, but the human element, or as Adrian Turpak likes to say, the human firewall is essential here too. And they have 5 different types of roles that require security training on an annual basis. And that's in conjunction with the technical requirements. So it's a comprehensive security program that takes the human and the digital world and makes sure that the protections are there.
That's really great. And I, again, really liked how you said that. The main point is that the issues can really drive what some of those improvements are. I think that really wraps up the whole theme of today's podcast. So let's do a brief recap. PCI-DSS is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. a mouthful in itself, and it's really setting out to reduce the level of fraud. It came about, I think you said about maybe 18 years ago or so, and that was really because of those losses incurred from internet fraud as everything started to bubble up and really grow. And I think, again, to your earlier point, the issues are what have driven a lot of these improvements. Was there anything else that you'd wanted to add to that brief little wrap up there?
I think you nailed it. The one thing I hadn't said, I just hinted at, I probably should say is, we saw this type of network security standards jump over to SWIFT, where SWIFT set up a program as well. And we do expect the strengthening of those to hit other payment channels too.
Yeah, it really is. As other payment methods have issues, they're definitely going to drive those improvements as well, kind of as we've been saying as our theme. But that's great, Craig. Thanks for that addition there. And thank you, Craig, for joining me today and to our listeners. Just make sure you tune back in every first and third Thursday of the month for a new episode. And as always, if you have any topics, comments, feedback, you're more than welcome to drop us an email at podcast@strategictreasure.com.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasure LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.